Well, welcome, Kerry, to the Recruitment Marketing and Sales podcast. And what a pleasure it is to have you today.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Sharon. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. Now, for our listeners, then Kerry Crockett is the president of the NPA Global Recruitment Network, and I'm going to let Kerry share a little bit more about her background because, it's a real privilege to have you with us today, Kerry. Talking about communities, professional communities, and how our industry can really leverage the opportunity. And you've got this amazing background that you've brought with you. So maybe if you could just share for listeners a little bit about that background, because I'm sure we'll learn more about it as we start chatting.
Sure, happy to. So I actually, this is sort of my second career. I started off as an occupational therapist and did that for almost 15 years and transitioned into the nonprofit association world. And that really was through a friend who introduced me to an organization. It was a pathology association. And so for the last 20 years, I've been leading organizations. Most have been medical. One was in insurance accounting and now NPA Worldwide. And so I think what I really find in terms of this career path has really ignited in me a passion for the work that these groups do. With the exception of NPA, they've all been nonprofit organizations. And so they're really giving back to the global community as it relates to medical findings or the work that they're doing. So not fundraising necessarily, although I've done that as well as a part of some of the organizations, but it's really about educating the members of the community so that they can go out and do bigger, better, stronger work for global environment, basically.
Right. Okay. And so, I mean, how did that transition then? Let's say from not for profit to where you are today with NPA. How did that come about?
Actually, it's pretty seamless because the work that NPA Worldwide does, that's a tax status, right? From nonprofit to for-profit, that's a tax status. But the work that the organization does is really very, very similar to what other nonprofit associations do or member-led, community-led organizations. And that's really the collective of the community coming together to provide networking opportunities and educational opportunities and collaborative opportunities so that the entire network of the entire community benefits from all of the parts, all the sums of the parts of the organization. And so it's very, very similar work.
Yeah. I mean, and just, I guess thinking of then about communities, from your experience, of all those different organizations and, being with NPA for, coming up a year now, for you and everything that you've seen, I imagine over the last 20 years, within, business and that whole environment, what is important, let's say, let's talk about, the industry that we're working in right now, recruitment. What is important about, business owners being part of a professional network and communities generally?
Yeah. Well, I think what's really important about that is it allows people to expand their community, their local community, so to speak. 20 years ago, the digital age hadn't really hit us as strongly in terms of visual opportunities to connect and those kinds of things. And everything was done by phone, as you know, or in-person meetings, which are still very important, very, very important. But I think now with the digital transformation that we have experienced, everybody has the opportunity to make their borders much less distant, right? And so everybody can communicate much easier over time zones, et cetera. And so it's brought people a lot closer together, and it's really accelerated the opportunity to develop those relationships that people would have taken much longer to do because they had to wait for face-to-face opportunities, or the phone just doesn't quite do it. You really need to see someone's face, understand how they feel and what they're expressing and all of those kinds of things, if they comprehend what you're saying. So I think that visual aspect has really just accelerated all of that relationship building, and it's made just a huge, huge difference in how people work and operate and build those relationships.
And it's a really interesting point, in terms of that acceleration, because, let's say years ago, before we had all the online communication. You might go to a local chamber meeting, and the same, you couldn't guarantee that the same people would be there kind of like month after month. And so even though you might go to those face-to-face meetings, it could take such a time to build up those kind of relationships, which probably is why organizations like BNI and some of those other really quite more intensive business networks operate on a weekly basis. So but when you think then about being part of any community and organization, there's this sort of like tension point in a way sometimes between giving and receiving. Some people, perhaps, go into it and there's almost like if I might use that word, a taking mentality as opposed to giving. And I just wonder, from being in different organizations, what do you see as, I guess, how do owners get a balance with that, and what's the right mindset or almost attitude to come into an organization and collaborate and build relationships?
I think, in my opinion, and this is how I operate when I am part of a professional community as well, my feeling is to go in, what can I offer? What do I have to offer? What do I bring to the table that might benefit others as well? And I don't mean to sound holier than thou and that kind of stuff, but that's certainly something that I consider when I think about joining a community, whether it's paid, whether it's free, etc. I volunteer as well in animal rescue things. And so it's, what can I bring to the table, right? That balance you have to, because you want to make sure that you're getting something out of what you're getting in, especially if it's a paid community that you're a part of, professional community. And so it's making sure that you're thinking about, how are you contributing to the relationships that you're building? How are you contributing to the overall education of the network? Do you have something to offer, whether that's through formalized education that you can produce, as well as just those in the hallway kind of conversations where people usually learn the most. But it's really about that balance. It's thinking about not just what am I getting out of this for myself, and what is the value for the dollar that I'm putting into it, because that goes beyond, right? I mean, we know that there's you're getting some value out of that because that's attention. But it's really, I think, too, about, what am I able to bring to the table so that I'm contributing to that network, which is going to make it stronger in the end, obviously. What was the goal for everybody? It end up with a very strong network.
Yeah. I mean, and I guess maybe this is an opportunity to just, explore, NPA in your organization a little bit more in terms of, and please do draw on your earlier background as well. But what do you think has really contributed to the community that NPA has built? Because certainly, we first met earlier this year. It was my first experience of being at an NPA conference, and I found it, quite a very powerful experience, and it was an environment I hadn't experienced before within professional communities. There was something quite special about it.
That's great to hear.
So you've been there now for a year. What's your experience, and what has contributed towards making this community? Because I want to pick your brains a little bit on the back of this question as well.
Sure. Well, you're right. I mean, I think NPA is very unique. It's extremely relationship driven. I mean, and that's what we pride ourselves on. There are other networks that have sort of similar business models in terms of the work that they do, but I think NPA is really unique in that fact that it's really relationship driven. And we foster that. We foster that through quite a few ways, through our in-person opportunities that we do, through our conferences around the world, the 4 that we have across the 4 regions that we currently have conferences in. We have monthly opportunities through Zoom calls that we have where we can get people together and network and talk about what's important to them and talk about the jobs, candidates they have, those kinds of things. But I think it's just critical. I mean, and we really work to foster that type of relationship, is to make sure that people have the opportunity to be face to face if they can, and then also be face to face from a virtual aspect as well.
Yeah.
We know that having those trusting relationships are what makes the difference completely, whether it's through, doing business as well, but then also just carrying on through in terms of people saying, I just want to be there. I just want to be a part of, even though I don't have any work right now to do, I still want to be a part of that network.
And you mentioned previously as well about, ROI. And I think it's very easy to sort of like think, well, ROI means, bottom line P&L, kind of like returns. And yet I think that there are so many other kinds of ROI that people can get from communities. In your experience, I mean, what are some of the examples that for you are really, this is what people can get out of being part of a professional network, and other communities?
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Where
so
to
many.
start?
Yeah, so many in my mind. I mean, just from my personal experience, just the relationships that I have made and cultivated, what that's done for my career from a business standpoint, as well as developing new friendships and things like that, and the opportunities that's presented to me along my career growth. From an NPA standpoint, I've seen it happen, with our members as well. And I've heard the stories before I came along of how this network and this community has really impacted the lives in a very, very tangible way for many, many people. There's one story that I have heard many times that I just find amazing when you think about it. And that is one of our members actually was diagnosed with cancer, very serious cancer, and was out with, treatment for many months. Another network member stepped up and actually ran her business for her for months so that she could continue to have an income and continue to keep her clients satisfied and the work going while she had chemo treatments and while she relearned how to walk. I mean, that's incredible. The amount of sacrifice that must have taken for that individual to do that, to run their business plus someone else's. That's the kind of stuff you just don't hear about. And they didn't do it for money. They did it because there was a true friendship, a true bond. They've known each other for a long time. I think that's the kind of stuff that you can't make that up, and it's incredible.
No.
It's incredible.
Yeah. Wow. That is quite a story, that one, isn't it? And I suppose thinking about, you talked about that blend of face to face, with online. We are living in an online digital world, aren't we? And you will have seen, no doubt, a lot of transition. But how do you see, apart from communication, how do you perhaps see that, the digital landscape is changing how communities are evolving? Because there are lots of platforms where you can be part of free communities. We both know that, So it almost kind of like, I suppose there's two parts here, isn't there? It's like, how's that digital landscape evolving communities? So let's start there, and then we'll come on to my next question.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a couple obvious ways. One is obviously just sort of that increased accessibility, right? I mean, you have the opportunity, and we talked a little bit too about acceleration already. It provides the opportunity for the acceleration of those relationships, being able to see someone's face, look into their eyes, even if it's through a camera, look into their eyes and understand, what they're thinking, what they're feeling, how they're reacting, responding. We all know that we feel much more trusting when we're able to look someone in the eyes and talk about whatever that subject is, right? I mean, you can see the expressions on their face, and you get a sense already of familiarity with that person versus over the phone or that kind of thing through a fax, God forbid, years ago. So I think that's definitely. I think the other piece to that is it's broken down some of the barriers. And when I talk about accessibility, there were times where we couldn't have relationships necessarily with people across the world because it made it much, much more difficult, right? They couldn't come to face-to-face events for a lot of reasons, cost or just the time away from their desk, et cetera, et cetera. So having that opportunity to be face-to-face from a virtual aspect has broken down those barriers and just made, I think, a much more level playing field for all of us to be able to communicate, to be able to do transactions, to able to just, again, build those trusting relationships. It's really just made a huge difference.
And I mean, and just picking up on that, I guess before my next question, really, online, it facilitates those kind of like, I guess, removing so many borders to relationships. But does that really translate into people actually doing business together? Across countries, time zones, continents, even. I mean, does it really extend in that way? The opportunity's there, but do people take it up?
They do. And we see it all the time, and we see it through split placements that people have made, et cetera. I mean, we have, what I will say, there's probably more transactions that occur within country just because that's, just because maybe the candidate doesn't want to move, and that just happens to be where, a business is, et cetera. But we also have quite a few cross-border placements. And so the opportunity for folks to be on the calls together and, again, see each other visually, look into each other's eyes, talk about what they need to talk about in terms of what what the role is, what the candidate is like, candidate interviews now that they're all virtual, et cetera. I mean, all of that accelerates that process and gets someone from point A, which is applying for a position, all the way into that position much, much faster than it used to be, and much less expensive than it used to be as well. And then you have to consider that factor too. So we're definitely seeing, the opportunity for the visual or the virtual, I should say, connections to really translate into transactions and into financial rewards in terms of those placements.
Right. It's amazing, isn't it? That, when you think about, I guess, the world beyond COVID and the acceleration of digital and the whole medium and how that's influenced and changed our industry. And, companies, will recruit virtually, internationally, and that just allows, search partners and recruitment companies to collaborate and bring more of that about, really, which is amazing, really. But you were talking about how digital has evolved, and how communities have evolved with that. There is a lot of, obviously, free communities that we can all be part of, and we probably all are part of, and there are paid communities. And so I suppose, with so much choice out there, how does a business owner decide what direction to go down? Do they do a bit of both? I don't know. I mean, what's been your experience, and what are your thoughts?
I think the first thing that I do, that probably others do, and if they don't, they probably should do. We all know time is very, very valuable, right? And so when you join a community, that means you are committing time to it. If you're going to do it right, committing time to that, whether you're giving or whether you're receiving, it takes time. And so making sure that you're using your time the most wisely as you possibly can makes sense. And so for me, it's about defining what my goals are. What do I want to get out of this? What do I want to be able to give to this community if I join, whether it's free, whether it's paid, et cetera? I think that makes that's the first step, is really defining what it is. I think that there is a reason probably to join, whether it's paid or whether it's free. There are different reasons there's reasons for doing either one of those. What I mean by that is, if it's a paid one, for example, a professional community, in that regard, I'm thinking professional development. What am I going to get out of it there? What can I contribute there? How might it enhance my career? How it might perhaps lead me to a different, better job opportunity? Can I then present if I want to, because I have something to share? So those kinds of things, makes a good sense. And those are goals that I've probably defined from a professional development standpoint. if I'm thinking about things that are free communities and thinking about social media, the Facebooks, the LinkedIn's, those kinds of things, again, I think there's an opportunity there as well, and defining what it is you want to get out of that, whatever that platform might be. And so I think that, you have to really define what it is you're looking to get out of it and what you want to give into it, what kind of time you have to commit to it, and then figure out which are the best ones for you. For example, for me, I'm not on Facebook. I don't find a tremendous amount of value in it for me personally. LinkedIn, I'm definitely on, and I contribute to it. And I participate in that kind of a way. So it just depends on where you want to put your time and allocate your time, and where you think you're going to get the most value out of it for yourself.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that probably, leads on, let's say, because I like the idea of, what's my outcome? What are my goals? What is it that I want to achieve? What can I give? How can I contribute? What do I need to learn? When you, because with all the different organizations that you've been part of, you will have worked with lots of new members and brought new members on board. What perhaps are some of the common mistakes that you see people make? Because I think if our listeners can learn from that, they'll probably recognize, and I'll probably recognize a few as well here, but recognize some of the mistakes that we can all make. But if we could just short circuit some of those, that would be amazing for listeners.
I think, off the top of my head, I think the one thing that comes to mind is people don't really give thought to what it is they're investing in. And that could be their cost investment and or a time investment, right?
Yeah.
So, thinking about somebody who might join NPA, for example. And again, it's a relationship driven network. And so you have to invest some time to build those relationships to make sure that, you're able to do the business with people because they trust you now and they see how you operate and you do what you say you're going to do. You have to prove yourself. I think one of the mistakes that we see often is people kind of come in thinking that, oh, I've joined, you've got my money, now I'll have to sit back and just let the jobs come to me or let the candidates come to me, and I don't have to do a lot of work around it. And that is a huge myth, and they find very quickly that they're not successful in that regard. So I think it's about understanding the amount of the investment that you have to give. And so, when you join, that you're thinking about that. But that's one of the big mistakes, is really just not giving that kind of any thought and sitting back and letting it happen. You really have to, I think, put yourself out there. You've got to make that effort. Sometimes it's the first step in terms of, if nobody else is reaching out, you've got to be the one to reach out. But I think that's a big one. I think another thing that comes to mind sometimes, and this is thinking about some of the free platforms or the free communities that you want to be a part of. And that could be sometimes it's either from exposing too much that you might not want or should be exposing, because remember that is forever now. Once it's out in the universe, it's not coming back.
Yeah.
So thinking about that, and I think a lot of times people don't really think about the fact that, especially some of our younger folks, they don't necessarily think about the longevity of some of that content.
Yeah.
And when that could come back to haunt them. So, thinking about the two separate types of communities that you would be a part of and the different mistakes that you can make in either one of those. But I think at the end of the day, if you're being honest, if you're being authentic, and if you're being yourself, it's really hard to go wrong there. It's really hard.
Yeah. And I love that point, actually. And it's a good reminder for people, in terms of that oversharing, because I'm sure we can probably all think of, individuals that we might meet at events, see online, and, it's like completely out there. And we're all different. We've all got choices. And I guess it's recognizing that, you can think about the fact that it is out there, isn't it? It's very hard to remove some of this content, isn't it? And it's kind of like realizing, you know what, if we have all got choices, and there's a consequence to choices.
That's exactly.
And it's just being mindful of what the consequence can be when you are putting certain content out there, in different communities.
Exactly.
Because there are people who will, straddle various communities within specific industries, of course. So yeah, I know it's interesting. And it's interesting as well, I guess, just from a community point of view, something that we've noticed, and you will have, within your roles over time as well, particularly the last few years, that from a marketing point of view, building communities is increasingly important. And so, ironically, today we were having a conversation with a client on a Superfast Circle call, and they were talking about ideas around building their own. Think of it as like a local, like a regional IT specialist company. Sort of market would be SME businesses, and so what they were talking about is a lot of the people that they're placing are youngish, perhaps Gen Z, millennial type devs, who are working remotely. And yes, they have online community, but they miss that sort of face-to-face connection. And as much as we know they love sitting behind a computer, they do actually like sometimes socializing as well. And so she was, coming up with this idea of actually building her own community within her company brand for candidates. Obviously, clients can be part of that as well. They're often candidates or clients, etc., as we know. But I guess if I could just pick your brains a little bit and just think about, if someone is thinking of setting up their own community, what would you suggest would be, some good practice things to do, perhaps, to build a community? I know you've talked about certain things, but starting a community is a bit different to actually being part of one, isn't it?
It is. That's a good question. I think if you're thinking about creating your own community, whatever that looks like, whether it's very small and you're vetting people, et cetera, or if it's just sort of open to the general public, I mean, you have to determine right off the bat how you want that to look as well. But I think, I'm going to go back to what I just said a minute ago, which is the authenticity, is making sure that if you are creating and developing something, that you're putting yourself out there as a true, authentic representation, right? You don't want to mislead people into what you represent or what you're about or what's meaningful or where your values lie, those kinds of things. Hopefully, at the end of the day, you're trying to attract people who have similar interests in whatever the community is focused around. And now that doesn't mean you want everybody to be a yes man and that everybody has the same opinion. That's not necessarily healthy either. Not healthy. But people who have a similar interest and who are open to coming in and contributing their ideas, their thoughts, their experiences as well, so that strengthens the community as well. But I mean, I think it's really about, like I said, just putting yourself out there and being open to that and trying to attract people who have that similar interest, so that you can engage and then build that network stronger and stronger and stronger around things that have meaning to everybody in that community, whatever that topic, whatever that area might be. But I think it's also important to have those divergent opinions, respectful divergent opinions, because I think that's where that diversity in thought, I think that's where strength is grown as well. And you end up with a much better product, a much better community, and people are able to speak honestly.
And that's good, because I think, I suppose in a way, if I summarize that, it's about having a purpose and a goal of what is the purpose of that community, a place to come together, a place where they can learn from each other, embracing that diversity of opinion and view, because that really, it's how we learn, rather than everybody
can be a safe space as well, right? People have to feel like they're safe and they're comfortable to express thoughts, their
Mm.
ideas, and not have somebody shoot them down immediately. I mean, that's not healthy
Mm.
for anybody. So
No.
it has to be a safe environment too, in my mind.
Yeah. And I suppose just thinking about something that you shared, earlier, in terms of, with NPA, and you have the face-to-face coming together, you have, the online, huge amount of online opportunities to connect.
Mm.
That, I guess, when if you are building a community, it's also probably deciding, what's the medium that you're going to use. Is it going to just be online? Is it going to be a blend? Frequency, so that the community know what they are becoming part of,
Mhm.
and everything.
Right.
So, okay.
Because everybody wants information differently, right? And
Right.
they learn differently, they build relationships differently, they connect
Mm.
differently. We know that sometimes there are barriers from an economic standpoint, from a distance standpoint.
Mm.
And so, when you have an organization that is global like NPA is, and we represent
Mm.
recruiting firms all over the world, we have to make sure that we are presenting and providing opportunities across a variety of mediums and across a variety of settings so that
Mm.
everybody has an opportunity to participate, regardless of whatever that barrier might be, whether it's distance, whether it's time, whether it's
Yeah.
cost, etc., and time zone for that matter as well. We also make
Yeah.
sure we accommodate that. So we have to be thinking about those types of things constantly to make sure that we are taking away as many barriers as there are
Mm.
that we possibly can to allow
Mhm.
as many people to participate that want to participate.
Right. Yeah. No, absolutely. And I guess, let's bring it back full circle then, because we've talked there about, building communities and free communities, but coming back to professional communities then. Maybe what I'd love to just invite to say a little bit more, because you shared a little bit about MPA, but for listeners who perhaps haven't heard of it, don't know an awful lot about it, but have heard of it, just share a little bit about the organization, what you guys do, and how can people get in touch
Yeah,
if they're
sure.
interested.
So NPA Worldwide is a for-profit member-owned cooperative that
Hmm.
represents professional recruiting firms around the globe. So we do have a vetting process. We don't permit franchise recruiting firms to participate. They
Hmm.
are usually just small or mid-sized recruiting firms. Many of them have just one person working the desk. Some have a few employees. Some have multiple locations. Um, so there is a little bit of a variety, but it is a niche organization for sure
Mm.
in terms of the work that we do and who we represent. And that's deliberate. That's deliberate. So we're
Mm.
not looking to dominate the world in terms of being, the only recruiting network that's out there, because that's not going to serve a purpose. We want to make sure that we're representing the small and mid-sized recruiting firms across the globe. And that's what we do.
Mm.
And so through that, as I mentioned, we provide opportunities for people to connect. And what that means is, whether they're in-person conferences, we do, like I said, 4 across the world. And usually those sort of land from a cadence in terms of 1 a quarter kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
We have multiple opportunities virtually for people to connect through opportunities that are around local getting togethers,
Mm-hmm.
as well as industry specific. So if you're in healthcare, we have groups that are just healthcare specific, and those folks can get together and talk about the work that they have to do there. And then, of course, we have our regional meetups as well, and those happen all over the world as well, where groups can get together locally. I'm actually flying out to New York City tomorrow to attend our New York, New Jersey holiday event. And that's where, 20, 30 people might come together, even 10 people get
Mm-hmm.
together on a local or regional basis to share, collaborate, continue with building those networks and building those relationships, etc. But it's an amazing group of individuals around the world, and I've had such a wonderful opportunity to meet so many of them already, just in my short, less than a year time here. But what I've found across the board, no matter where I've been, is how welcoming folks are, and how interested and curious they are about myself, about others, about the work that they're doing, and it's just a very healthy environment from that standpoint. So I'm really, really proud to be a part of NPA. It's just such an amazing organization, and so it's been a great opportunity so far, and I'm just looking forward to many more years.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's interesting. So you're heading off to New York tomorrow. I'm dialing in similar time tomorrow as we are now. I'm dialing into a small local meetup in Greensboro, North Carolina.
Yeah.
So they're Zooming me in, and I shall just have a coffee with folks and have a catch up. So it's great.
It doesn't matter where you are. That's the whole point of that. It doesn't matter where you are. You can still be a part of it.
Yes, no, absolutely. And I'm sure that there will be people who are listening that probably have not been part of any kind of organization. I remember a client coming to one of our events last year, and and they'd been in business about 28 years. And they said to me, if you'd have said to me a couple of years ago that I'd be sat here today, I wouldn't have believed you, because my experiences, I was brought up that recruiters don't talk to each other. You don't talk to your competitors. And yet, what did we do during COVID? It was like, gosh, we needed each other. We were learning from each other and helping each other and everything. And it has opened things up. And I think, likewise, there are people probably who won't have been part of organizations because they think, well, I don't, should I be telling people? Should I be sharing? Well, actually, I think, our experience is that sometimes, the more vulnerable you are and the more open you are and the more that you give, then, at some point, then you end up receiving.
That's right. That's right.
And there are some fantastic communities out there. So if there are people listening who haven't been part of a network, then explore them, because there's an awful lot that you can gain from them. And if anybody listening, because we're talking about a global network here, Kerry. I've been in different parts of the world this year, which has been fantastic. But how would people get in touch? What would somebody do? Who should they contact if they're interested in NPA?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of opportunities. NPAworldwide.com. You can start there for sure. You can reach out to me, which is K Crockett at NPAworldwide.com. Sarah Freiberger is actually our director of membership, and she handles membership sales and answers questions for North America, Latin America, Europe, the EMEA region. And that is FREIBURGER at NPAworldwide.com. And then we have Kristen Davey, who is in Australia. She's based in Melbourne, Australia, who handles that market as well as the Asia market. And that's K Davey, DAVIE at NPAworldwide.com. So there's a lot of opportunities to reach out to us, and certainly people can contact you, and you can put them in touch with us as well.
Absolutely. If anybody didn't catch any of those and you don't want to press rewind, then just drop me an email at sharon@superfastrecruitment.co.uk and we will connect you. So, Kerry, thank you so much for your time today. It's been really great and been a great insight as well. So I look forward to seeing you in a few months' time.
Yes, that's right.
And
very quickly.
Yeah, and all the best before then. It will come upon us before we know it, won't it?
Well, thank you so much for having me. And I, again, look forward to seeing you in Philadelphia at our global conference, March 27th through 29th.
Absolutely.
2025. So you're right, that will be coming soon. But it's been a pleasure speaking with you today, Sharon.
Thanks for your time, Kerry. It's been great. Speak soon.
All right. Take care.